Welcome Year 10 to photosynthesis. We're going to be looking at the process of photosynthesis and how we use those raw materials to make glucose and oxygen. We're going to be describing the chemical reaction that takes place and where in the plant it does take place, as well as stating the symbol and word equation. So plants fall into a group of living organisms that are called autotrophs. They produce their own food, in this case glucose. Plants do this via a process called photosynthesis. And this mainly occurs in leaves and uses specific parts of those leaves to ensure that all of the raw materials are delivered effectively. So we start off with the stomata, which is found on the underside of the leaf, and these are the two guard cells that create an opening. That opening is called the stomata. The two sausage-shaped cells either side are called my guard cells. Those sausages can become turgid or flaccid and close and open that stomata to let different amounts of gas through. We've got the mesophyll cells. Now these cells contain chloroplasts. Some mesophyll cells will contain lots and lots of chloroplasts. However, some may only contain a few. We also have a vascular bundle, and that has two specific functions. First of all, we have the xylem, which translocates water from the roots to the shoots to ensure there is a constant supply of water for the process of photosynthesis. And then we have the phloem that allows sugars that are made via the process of photosynthesis, glucose, which allows them to be transported down to the root hair cells for processes such as respiration and used in specific functions like active transport. Now, photosynthesis is an anabolic reaction. It takes small molecules and combines them into much bigger molecules. So it takes a small molecule of CO2 and synthesizes a much bigger molecule, which is glucose. It's an endothermic reaction. It needs energy in the form of light from the environment. Carbon dioxide, CO2, is required and it uses light energy. Light energy, we talk about photons of light hitting those chloroplasts. A bit like activation energy. If the photon does not hit the chloroplast, then photosynthesis does not happen. Photosynthesis produces glucose and oxygen, which are available for us for respiration. This is the symbol equation for photosynthesis. And you'll recognise the bottom, that big molecule, C6H12O6, is the symbol for glucose. I suggest you pause this for a second and take a minute to write down that equation. So we talk about the equation for photosynthesis. And just like any chemical reaction, we have our reactants and our products. If we think about our reactants, they are going to be my carbon dioxide and water. They're my reactants. We'll also see that in order for photosynthesis to happen, we have to have a facilitator. We require the light energy and we also require chlorophyll. Those chlorophylls are contained within the chloroplasts within our plant cell. My end products are going to be my carbohydrates, which are glucose, and glucose tends to be stored in the plant when it's not being used as starch. And also oxygen, which is vital. Ensure that you have this equation written down. Pause the slide if necessary. So we're thinking about how is the leaf adapted. Now the leaf is an organ. Just like our heart is an organ in us as humans, a leaf is a photosynthetic organ in the plant. We talk about the plant having numerous organs, and some of them can photosynthesize and some of them can't. Now, those cells that are photosynthetic will contain chloroplasts. Now, I've mentioned chloroplasts a number of times, and chloroplasts are an organelle, which are tiny parts of my cells. They are found inside a plant cell. Now, plants can be adapted in a multitude of ways to photosynthesize. I suggest you take a second to pause the slide now and think, how can they be adapted? Some plants have a broad, flat surface that allows maximum light absorption. The bigger the surface, the more light can be absorbed. Let's get used to using those and statements. The greater the surface, the greater the amount of light absorbed. Then we can talk about the high concentration of chloroplasts in organelles. Now, we all know that lots of green plants are different shades of green. And the thing that makes them different shades of green is the different quantities of chloroplasts within their organelles. So a plant that is darker green will have a higher concentration of chloroplast. Therefore, it will allow greater photosynthesis. Again, and statements. Plants also have systems to prevent water loss. I've already talked about stomata. They open in the day but close at night, or when hot, to conserve water. This allows us to regulate the amount of water being lost from the plant to stop it dehydrating. Also, as you can see from my leaf on the centre of the screen, that some of them are covered in a shiny layer. We call that layer a waxy cuticle. You usually find it's only on the top of the leaf, and that acts as a barrier to stop water evaporating from the cells. And lastly, a system of gas exchange. So within my leaf structure itself, there are pockets of space, and that allows CO2 and O2 to enter and leave the leaf by the process of diffusion. So that's the movement from high to low concentration. Now, by ensuring that they're close to the edge, it gives you a short diffusion distance. Those of you doing the higher tier, we need to be talking about those short diffusion distances. Now, this slide, I would like you to click on the hyperlink and watch the YouTube video about the structure of the leaf. It will take about 4 minutes. Right, let's check how we got on. So we have at the top of the screen an upper epidermis. Above my upper epidermis, I also have a waxy cuticle, which is my thick black layer across the top. We've already talked about why that's important. Then below that, we have a layer of cells that all look like a little bit of a brick wall, and they are called palisade mesophyll. And you'll see that there are very small gaps between them, if any, and that is to allow maximum absorption of photons of light. These have usually the highest concentration of chloroplasts. Below that, we have the spongy mesophyll, and we can see those air pockets that I've already discussed. On the bottom, we have a waxy cuticle again, but you'll notice that it's not always as thick as the upper one on the upper epidermis. We've got the guard cells either side of my stomata, and my stomata will actually be my small holes, which are my pathways in and out of the cells for water vapour, O2 and CO2. And we have my vascular bundle. We have xylem and phloem, which we'll talk about a bit more in a minute. So what we need to do is now, using the labels again on the right hand side of your screen, add these to your diagram. So we've got 5-6 labels here that talk specifically about the functionality of each part of this section of the leaf. Now, this is quite important because this appears year on year on the exams, and we talk about pupils' basic understanding of the structure of the leaf and how it relates to the process of photosynthesis. Take a minute, add the labels. So let's see how many you got right. Mark your work, give yourself a grade out of 6, please. Exam style questions. Why do most of the chloroplasts occur inside the palisade cells? Worth 1 mark. What is the role of the waxy cuticle? And describe 2 ways the leaf is adapted for optimal photosynthesis. What is the difference between chloroplasts and chlorophyll? What is the word equation for photosynthesis? What 2 ways can you describe the reaction of photosynthesis? And lastly, challenge for those of you in V1, 2 and W1 and 2, explain why the guard cells close the stomata at night. Here are the answers to your questions. Please give yourself a mark. Lastly, I'd like you to go on to Sam Learning and check how much of this you've absorbed. You may need to watch it more than once. The password for Sam Learning is your date of birth, followed by your first and second initials. If you have a double-barreled name, it is always the second part of the double-barreled name. There is an example at the bottom of the screen.